Hey guys. Hey Yang. Hey Juho.
Hi again. Yeah, now it's darker here, but I think we might get Shodipo once the connection works. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic. I mean, design systems.
I'm unable to start with you.
Ah, cool. So we have Shodipo as well. So from my perspective, it's a very cool topic because it's right in the intersection of design and development, and I think that a lot has happened in the space in the couple of past years, and I think a lot will happen in the next years. So I mean, my question to you might be that how do you see the future of tooling when it comes to design systems? Where will the tools go?
Well, I think Yang has an opinion on that.
So yeah, I mean, we're actually very excited for this whole landscape of emerging, very young class of tools. But there's just a lot of this like raw innovation happening in the space, and everyone is pushing. I think it's generally in the same direction, and also just hearing even from folks on the core React team about their thoughts on how React as a declarative paradigm is they would love to enable classes of visual tools for authoring apps. This is stuff that Facebook internally has been working on as well for a while. So it's really exciting to see.
I mean, I think from my point of view, it's clear that like this idea of like handing over static assets and like hoping that the person on the other end understands your intent in that design is a very lossy medium. But like, do you think like is the vision, Yang, for you that your tool will be used by designers and developers, or is it that they're one and the same person? Like, is this is this medium of like using like a shared interactive asset actually solving the communication problem between these people, or do we need a different solution for that?
Yeah, great question. So far, we're our near-term focus has been on developers, but yeah, I think the longer term, eventually we do want to actually welcome designers into the product and keep Plasmic something that is approachable to folks who aren't versed in all the nitty-gritty around authoring presentational code today. So this is stuff that managing this complexity is actually one of the ongoing challenges for us. But I think in time we hope to actually lower the barriers for contributing to products from folks beyond the technical team.
Yeah, I think Shodipo spoke about like the necessary classification of like UI designers, UX designers. Then some can code and some can't. But like Shodipo, where do you see like tools fitting into this? Like, what current tools do you see that are helping the most with teams collaborate on these across these various different topics?
Yeah, so amazing tools like so we have Figma for design, we have Adobe XD, we have SketchUp, but most people always like, okay, so which is better, Figma, Adobe, or Sketch? So that should actually be done. It should really be what exactly works for you. I'm not really a fan of doing versus challenge. That's this versus that, this versus that. It's really what works for you. If Sketch works for you, use Sketch. If Adobe works for you, use Adobe. Funny enough, so most times I use Sketch, but I also use Adobe XD when I want to do things like prototype, and I also want to share a public URL to someone that could see my design. I use Adobe, so I use kind of both of them. But yeah, Figma is cool too, but I don't use Figma usually, but I'll use Figma when I want to use collaboration, when I want like multiple people to collaborate together or one design at the same time. I would use Figma. So it's like different use cases. There are these amazing tools out there. Then when we talk about communication, we have Zeppelin, where you can upload your design screens and also have a conversation. So for Zeppelin, we have InVision. But one major thing that we need here is we need to find a way to really, how should I put this? For designers to be able to use GitHub. I believe Adobe is working on something like this. I got this information about it last year. Adobe is working on something like this. And again, a tool I'm working on to help designers push their projects, their designs as SVGs from Adobe XD, Figma, or SketchUp directly to GitHub as SVGs and still retain the prototype, and also pull them back, fetch them back from GitHub, still retain designs even as SVG files into these applications. It's quite complicated, but yeah, having a lot of problems right now with this. But hopefully, yeah, this is something I believe that this is a tool I really believe that if it's free, will really like make so much difference. I believe so. So yeah. Just need to build more tools. Same way companies build tools and developers build tools for developers. There should be tools for designers that companies and developers should work on.
So let's talk about design systems, since that is kind of like the topic of our event today. I mean, are design systems, what are they tools? Are they methodologies? Is it a process? Like, because where I see most companies, like as a consultant, where I see most companies struggle to adapt design systems is nothing to do with not having the right tool for drawing the pixels or like storing storing the artifacts. It's just that there generally just isn't this kind of like, sort of culture of collaboration. Like what do you currently see like the biggest hurdle of adoption for design systems inside corporations?
Okay, so design
maybe
system.
you go first, yeah.
Okay. Juho?
No, you can go first. I have some thoughts on the. Sorry.
Okay, so design systems basically are I would call it processes by which like developers and other designers also can follow along a certain path. So design systems can be just so. Okay, for example, I have like this really huge project I'm working on. It's an example, and I would want to have design systems. So I'm gonna ease the onboarding of new designers and new developers into my projects and show them what kind of fonts I use, what kind of colors I use, what kind of buttons I use, what kind of checklists I use, what kind of select feature I use. And so design systems, when we think about design systems, a lot like the name, a lot of us think is specifically for designers, but no, that's wrong. So design system is for both designers and developers. You have some companies have CSS in their design systems to make you understand how exactly to design this button to look exactly the way it should. So you have the CSS part for developers to take a look at and utilize. So basically, I would say design systems are basically that helps you basically some that basically like I should put this. I'm looking like the best way to put this that will be super explanatory. So a place where you can find the processes that companies follow to build their application is going to help you create a consistency in design, consistency in patterns by which a company follows. So enterprise companies like Shopify, Apple, and Google, other amazing companies, IBM, they all have design systems by which when they have new designers or new developers on board that they have to follow. So that's in my explanation, that's what I would call a design system. I believe other speakers will have more to say about this.
Yeah, so last year I had this interesting client case, and in some ways it was a classic case that the client wanted to get something done in a couple of months. They have the design in mind, and they had these mock-ups that they did in XD, and they were static mock-ups, and the thinking from the client was that now we have these mock-ups, so let's write some HTML and CSS, and you come here and you write the React. And in practice, it didn't work out like that, because it's one thing to go from static to dynamic and tweak it, but because me and my developer friend, we had this let's say design system background, so we know the value, and the client didn't get the value in the beginning, but I think they got it by the end. So because we wanted to finish the project in time, we didn't go with this route that you will write it by view and you want to like port it over from the mockup to this markup. Instead, what we did, I think first 2 weeks we were building primitives and patterns. So we building a component system for the client, and there was not much progress. I mean, visible progress. We made progress, it was important, but it wasn't something that you can call value. And so what happened next? I mean, they were like little suspicious. Is this going to work? Because they had clear designer, clear developers, and they didn't sort of get it yet. But I think what happened next is that we started getting use done using our component system. So now they started getting results that matched to their mockups. And then the developer got it. The developer started using our components to build the views or add functionality. He really got it. And then the way we convinced the designer was that we started spending some time sitting down with the designer, because a design is never perfect. It's always like incomplete or missing something. So we literally spent some time with the designer of the client, like pairing on the system. So the designer was telling us, add some padding there, add some margin there, improve the system. So it's like, I think you have to work really with the client and be patient, because it can be uphill, especially in the beginning if they don't understand what they're getting. But by the end of the project, the client was using our component system to do their own things, own development. So in the end, it was success. But in the beginning, they were very suspicious about what we're doing with the approach. So yeah, that was sort of success for all, because they got the system that's hopefully scalable in the future. And let's just say it's somehow it's politics, and it's a lot of factors. So it's very, you have to get a lot of buy-ins. So you have to convince different parties. But that's how it worked out for us last year.
I've always thought of design systems in companies more like a startup or like a product, in that, like, if a company is large enough to actually benefit from a design system, it's probably too large to be manageable top down, where you tell every team and every developer exactly how to build their software, because, they're like, isolated sort of like teams that have ownership of their own development track or their own product feature. So it's almost like growth hacking, like finding a product market fit, creating something that creates value, and then doing internal marketing and like growth hacking the adoption of the design system inside the company, because fundamentally the developers will want to use it, the designers will want to use it. There's no way to force a inferior product, inferior workflow down people's throats. That's the way at least I look at it. It's almost like if you have a design system team, you should have like a dashboard of adoption and like metrics in the same way as a startup has, a dashboard. Then that way you're gonna like look at it as a kind of milestone. Is like, oh, how do we onboard this next hard to reach segment of customers? What can we give for them to make their lives better?
Yeah, I mean, I think one point is that you don't create the design system because you want to create the design system. You're creating the system because you want to solve a problem. And for us, it was the problem for us as contractors was meeting the deadline, because we knew very well that if we don't use this disciplined approach and do the components, because it's going to change anyway, so then we are not going to make it to the deadline. So I think it's very important that you have some motivation behind the work, that you're not just doing design system because that's what people do. Instead, you do the design system to solve or address some concrete business problem.
So I think I don't know if there's another question. So I think something really just popped into my head that I think we should really talk about, and that's quite interesting in my head. So what if a company has a design system and that company does a complete rebrand? So is the design system restarted? So that restarts the whole design system.
Yeah, I mean, so I think in the naive sense, like when people talk about design systems, they think that there's this element of reusability to it. It's like, oh, if we need to rebrand our whole company, we can just change the design system, and then all of our products will automatically, like all of our components will automatically update, and our website will be, now rebranded. But of course, we all know that design is a lot more than just changing colors and fonts and padding and spacing. So that's a really good question. Juho, have you had any experience doing this?
I have some ideas, because it was years ago. I saw this idea that each company should have some kind of like law or a book or constitution describing that that's the company, that's how it works. So design system in a way describes what the company is about. And it's true that, I mean, it's not only about changing colors or fonts. I mean, if you want some touch up, you can do that. But it's when you do a very big change in the company, you really have to think through all the patterns, maybe it begins from the client. So you have a company and then you decide that I want to address this segment in the market, and then you start thinking how can I move to this direction, and maybe over time I can give you a good example of this. Like, consider Google Maps. It's changing all the time, but you never notice the changes. And the way they do it is that they know what it should roughly look like in a couple of years. I think they plan ahead by maybe some years, and then over time, instead of doing very big change at once, because then they get complaints, they change one thing at a time. So maybe if you want to rebrand your product or do like big rebranding project, maybe instead of thinking that it's a big bang, maybe you can think it in terms of time, so that you do the changes, like you do a little bit over time, and then one day you notice that everything was completely different. So maybe that's kind of the engineer approach, that you divide the problem, and now you know that you have this problem and the solution has to be divided over time. So that will be my solution to this kind of work. I think the design system will help a lot, but then I think you need some planning to evolve it over time.
And I think that needing planning, I think, is a great jumping off point to something I wanted to discuss, which was that do you ever feel like people are kind of viewing design systems as these kind of like silver bullets or like a magic solution, where like there are some truly hard things about building products inside organizations? Some of them are to do with communication, some of them are to do about decision making, planning, and like people think that, oh, we'll just make this style guidist or this sort of like component library, and suddenly all of our problems are magically solved. And then when it doesn't solve the problem, then design system gets kind of like the blame of like not solving something that it never purported to solve. Is it just me, or is this something that you see happening as well?
Hey, Yang, do you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah. I do think that design systems have they're massive in helping scale and helping you achieve consistency, reuse, quality, etc. in a complex org. But I think where it starts being murkier is thinking that design systems can get you all the way to cover the entire surface area of a product, or allow you to get away with not having to pop them in the escape hash and actually have custom designs or styling or layouts or things like that for any particular portion of the app. I think design systems are there for a broad coverage of space, but it's, at least for any organization that is constantly striving to innovate and to push their products further. The product teams are usually the ones pushing the boundaries on the use cases and being close to the users and innovating in the application domain and whatnot. So yeah, I think there's always going to be a need for basically stepping outside of the design system.
Does Plasmic have a design system?
Yeah. We do. It's called Plasmic Kit, and it's basically it's not a super creative name, but it's actually something that we've been retrofitting into Plume, which is the new component behavior system that we were talking about. So yeah, a lot of parts of Plasmic itself are constructed in Plasmic.
Oh, so it's bootstrap you. It's a snake that eats itself. You build Plasmic with Plasmic. Oh, that's very cool. I mean, I think that's the ideal, right? I remember at one of my previous jobs, we implemented the website for our design system using our design system, which was a fun dependency hell, but also a great way of like testing out that everything worked. We had a Webpack library loader, so every time you changed any component style, it actually changed the website in which it was rendered as well. It was an easy way to break it too. So yeah. Let's I think I want to cater also a little bit for like for more beginner audiences here. Juho, what advice would you give for somebody who is looking to start their first sort of design system project, or maybe like even try out if a design system would be sort of viable in their company? What's the first step to take?
I mean, I'm a little biased, but I think I would look into existing solution like Team UI, because Team UI, it's giving a lot of value out of the box. So they implement basic primitives you're likely going to need, and they implement these good ideas. You get this nice syntax for margin and paddings and a lot of things. It's sort of technical way, but I think adopting something like that as a developer is very, very valuable, especially in context of React, because it's going to give you this like solid base on top of which to build, and it's sort of the first step towards something more robust.
That's certainly good advice. Shodipo, how about you? Do you have any advice for anybody who wants to embark on the journey of design systems?
Yeah, I would say learn to always follow things to the letter, and like just really learn to follow, for example, how we follow documentation. I would say Stack Overflow, how we follow Stack Overflow, and we always read what exactly happens until we copy and paste. Follow documentation to the letter, follow the design system to the letter, read every single thing before you implement anything, and don't just copy and paste or just like do stuff. Always read the documentation. It's super important as a beginner. But you get some point where you can automatically predict what happens with what. So as a beginner, you should follow and read every single process, every single line. It helps you get better at what you do as a developer or designer.
Yeah, I find to be in a similar situation often where I just need to tell people to eat their carrots and peas. It's like, oh, you just must do this thing that is hard and boring instead of just jumping into the thing that is fun, which is like copy paste some code and like get it working. But I think in this case, it's absolutely important. Yang, what about you? What have you learned about design systems that you wish you would have known when you started? What advice would you give to somebody embarking on this? Yang, can you hear me? Have I?
Sorry, that part was cutting out for me. Could you repeat the question one more time?
Oh, yeah. Question is, what advice would you give? What have you learned on your own journey that you would give as an advice somebody who's embarking on it for the first time with design systems?
Oh, I guess my main advice is, always keep your ears close to the product and the users. Listen to their needs. That's everything that we do. Whether engineering or design or working on design systems or products, it's all in service of that experience and the user and the goals of the organization. So just always keep that in, because sometimes it can become easy to become more and more tunnel visioned into your particular domain. And so yeah.
Awesome, thank you. All right, I think we are now at time, so we'll have to wave goodbye for a minute, but only for a minute. If you do want to, you can join the public Zoom chat that's going to start happening immediately after we wrap up here, where any of the conference goers can also join and have a chat with us.